Oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. First order of business is call to order and roll call.
Dana Hollinger,
Here.
Margaret Brown,
Excused.
Matthew Seha, for John Chung, Richard Costigan, Priya Mathur, Bill Slayton, and Alan LaFaso for Betty Yee.
And please note, in attendance is David Miller and Ralph Cobb. Right. Okay, so first order of business, or second order, is approval of the November 14th, 2018 Risk and Audit Committee timed agenda. Okay, moved by Slayton, seconded by Costigan. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Third item is Ms. Diadamo and the executive report.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Madam Chair and committee members, Marlene Timberlake Diadamo, CalPERS team member. Today's agenda will focus primarily on audit action items. Belize Shapui, Chief Auditor, and representatives from KPMG will present to you the Independent Auditor's Report for fiscal year 2017-18 and the review of the Independent Auditor's Management Letter. KPMG will also present the draft audit report and accompanying reports on the basic financial statements and their draft management letter. The last audit item is the Independent Financial Statement Auditor Selection. Lastly, Forrest Grimes will present the Enterprise Risk Management Framework Review as an information item. This will include the enterprise-wide risk assessment outcomes presented in the Risk Management Dashboard, updated risk profiles by cross-functional work groups, and the risk heat map showing prioritization of each risk. The next Risk and Audit Committee meeting is scheduled for February 20th, 2019, and includes the review of the Risk and Audit Committee delegation and the 2018-19 mid-year plans for enterprise compliance and the enterprise risk management divisions. Thank you, Madam Chair. This concludes my report, and I would be happy to take questions.
Seeing no questions, do I have a motion to approve the September 25th, 2018 Risk and Audit Committee meeting? Okay, moved by Mathur, second by Costigan. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Nothing is being pulled off the consent calendar, so it moves us to item 6, action agenda item, the Independent Auditor's Report. Ms. Shapui.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Belize Shapui, Office of Audit Services. Agenda item 6A is an action item. Staff is requesting the Risk and Audit Committee to approve the board's independent financial statement auditor, KPMG's audit reports for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2018. KPMG staff are here presenting with me. I would like to turn it over to Lisa Avis, Managing Director from KPMG.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Committee. Again, we just want to thank you for this opportunity to be here and present the results of our audit. I know we're on a timed agenda, so I'll keep our discussion brief, and then we'll have time for questions after our discussion here. So the scope of our audit was over the financial statements for fiscal year ending June 30, 2018. We just want to remind the committee that it was management's responsibility to prepare the financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and also to design, implement, and maintain internal controls over financial reporting to provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements were free of material misstatement. And it was our responsibility to design and audit procedures to obtain reasonable assurance that those financial statements are free from material misstatement. So as a result of that, and for the first agenda item here, we have 3 deliverables that we provided for your review. 2 of those are audit opinions over the financial statements, and 1 of them is the report to the Risk and Audit Committee. So the first opinion is the Independent Auditor's Report. And CalPERS financial statements received an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance we give on financial statements, and so that means that the financial statements were fairly presented. Now, as part of this opinion, I always just want to highlight an other matters paragraph that we have in the opinion. So if you read through the financial statements, you'll see that we do opine on 2018. There is data and a column for 2017. That information for 2017 is at a summary level, and so it doesn't represent a full GAAP presentation. That's consistent with CalPERS policy. This paragraph here is consistent with past audit reports. We just wanted to draw your attention to that. In addition, the 2017 financial statements were audited by other auditors. So the second opinion that we issued was over internal control over financial reporting, which is required under government auditing standards. Happy to report that we did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. We do have a couple of observations that we'll discuss in the next agenda item, but like I said, no issues that rose to a significant deficiency or material weakness level. We also opined on compliance with laws and regulations that would have an impact over financial statements, and we noted no instances of noncompliance. So with that, I'll turn the third deliverable over to Bridget here.
Hello, so this is our required communications to you guys. I just wanted to highlight a couple items for you. During the current fiscal year that we're reporting on, CalPERS adopted GASB 75 and did an immaterial correction for GASB 68, which is recording CalPERS portion of the GASB 68 net pension liability and the GASB 75 OPEB liability on the, or within the financials. So you'll see a new line item on the schedule for that. It's about $1 billion. The other item I wanted to highlight is we have to communicate our procedures over estimates. So we have our more significant estimates, which include total pension liability, investments at NAV, the IBNR, and the estimated liability for the long-term care, which we have included details in the letter on. And then I also wanted to highlight a couple entries that we had on our summary of uncorrected audit misstatements, which is attached to the letter. The first one is related to the Q4 alternative investments. They're valued on an estimated amount, and they true it up for the Q4 actuals, and it resulted in a difference that was above our posting threshold, so it's included on that schedule. And then the other one is related to the GASB 75 item that I mentioned earlier. So at the time the financials were prepared, management estimated the liability on the numbers that they had available at the time, and we were waiting for information from the state controller's office and state auditor's office. When we got the information, management updated their estimate, and we had amount that was above our posting threshold, so it had to be included on our summary of uncorrected audit differences. Then the only other item I wanted to highlight was that we had no disagreements with management.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing no questions, it's an action item. So do I have a motion to approve the independent auditor's report? Okay. Moved by Mather, seconded by Slayton. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion approved. Okay, 6B, review of the independent auditor's management letter.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name's Brock Romano, audit partner at KPMG. I'm going to walk through our management letter and its 5 comments at a high level. If there is some particular comments that the committee would like to talk more about, be more than happy to do that. But at a high level, Lisa had mentioned initially that we didn't identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. Had we done so, auditing standards would require that we would communicate those to you in writing, and they would have been part of the previous action item. What you have before you in a management letter are what we call process improvements. So these are either minor deficiencies in internal control or opportunities for improvement. I would suggest that none of these items would need the attention of the Risk and Audit Committee at these time, but are more of kind of best practice type of comments. And so I've kind of grouped the 5 comments into 3 buckets. 2 relate to documentation. One is about a non-GAAP policy. It's a best practice for an entity to identify and document their non-GAAP policies. What Bridget talked about earlier in our summary of waived adjustments would be items that would qualify kind of as a non-GAAP policy. And I might comment that the valuing investments on a quarter lag is very common with large pension plans. So nothing unusual there. We also had a comment on accounting position papers. So the Finance and Accounting Office does what I would call a best practice, where they document some of their key decisions. And some of those key decisions, since we were new auditors, we looked at both some recent accounting positions and some old ones, and noted that some of them could use updating because accounting rules had changed, and/or current presentation might have morphed over time. We also made a suggestion that they focus, that those position papers focus not just on what decisions were made, but an analysis of the literature and the law in terms of supporting the decisions that were made. We also had a few comments regarding some of the insurance activities at CalPERS, particularly the health care fund and the long-term care fund, particularly as it relates to third-party administrators and some of the activity and oversight over those third parties, including reconciling summary claim data to detailed claim data to ensure the accuracy of items that are reported in the CAFR. We also had some suggestions related to the healthcare fund in terms of evidencing the monitoring that they do over those third parties. It was clear to us that there is a robust process for monitoring. Our question was more on the documentation of it. And then also to have the health actuary actually make a representation and an assertion to support the year-end IBNR calculation that shows up in the CAFR. And then we had one final comment on census data. So part of our audit, there's a large component of our audit that deals with the member management system and the accumulation of member census data, all key information that goes into the projection of the actuarial estimates that you heard earlier. It's all based on the collection of that data. And what we saw at CalPERS is not uncommon what we've seen other large multi-employer pension plans. There's some noise in the collection of that data. We had about 100 data quality issues, gender, date of birth, salary, eligibility items. Again, fairly common for a large multi-employer plan. With that, that's the high level, if you will, for the management letter. I'll pause if there's any particular questions.
Yeah, first I want to thank you, and I also wanted to say on some of these recommendations, I know that staff had concurred and we're looking forward to we're incorporating them. And so we do have a question, Mr. Costigan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am interested on the CalPERS system. Exactly walk me through the process. What did you do? Because that data comes from the employers. So
Sure.
When you talk about we recommend the system enhance its existing internal controls. So what are the internal controls that need to be enhanced? Because that's different than an employer reporting to us.
Sure. So the process, our process, includes going to source documents at the employer. So we selected about 100 rate plans across primarily perfs B and C. And we made sample selection of active members where we obtained source documentation, what we call payroll records from the employer, and then traced that activity as submitted to CalPERS, and then as that data was submitted from CalPERS to the census file. And what's common is that pension plans will have routines and controls to accept the data that's submitted to them. But there is a heavy reliance on the data that is submitted to them. And occasionally, data irregularities would exist. Date of birth, again, examples, date of birth, gender issues that don't tie back to source documents and primarily relate to data that was sent to CalPERS, probably inaccurate to begin with. Then there were some what I call data quality issues that dealt with timing. So right around year end, some employers are not timely in submitting their data. And so eligibility issues can be cutoff issues depending upon when data is submitted. So our recommendation is it's one of vigilance and diligence, right? The process is there's a cost-benefit analysis that I think CalPERS has to go through. Had these results been significantly worse in the sense that there were more data quality issues, I think we would have had a different conversation. I would classify what we noticed in this year's audit is fairly common. I don't know if you'll ever get to a zero tolerance with this type of process, given the amount of rate plans and employers. But I think it's our job to go through this exercise, make a conclusion every year that the data is complete and accurate, so you can rely on those actuarial estimates being based on good quality data. At some point in time, if the data quality issues stay at this level or deteriorate, we may not raise it at a management letter, but I thought it would be something that would be worthwhile in our initial year audit to share with the committee and with management.
But you would agree that's an external issue. That's the reporting agency.
Right, that's not us.
It is, but there's a recognition that it has the potential to impact total pension liability calculations. And
Well, I mean, I guess I would somewhat, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, I'd respectfully disagree in that it is up to the employer to report. We don't have the mechanisms in place to actually enforce the enforcement. If there's a recommendation you'd like to come forward with, I'd like to hear that, other than saying we need to enhance the internal controls, because what I don't necessarily see is what is the internal control that you're recommending we enhance.
sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions and that this is an action item, do I have a motion to approve? Okay. Moved by Mather, seconded by Costigan. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Ms. Chapuis, 6C, the Independent Financial Statement Auditor Selection.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Belize Chapuis again. Agenda item 60 is an action item. Staff is requesting the Risk and Audit Committee to approve and recommend to the board one of the three options identified by staff as noted in the agenda item to secure the board's independent financial statement auditor. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Well, I have a recommendation to my fellow board members, and given that there was only one proposal for an RFP, I recommend that we cancel the RFP and put it out for rebid in the spirit of vendor participation and competition. Do I have a motion? Okay, the motion is moved by Slayton and seconded by Maher. All those in favor?
You have discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Costigan.
I had pushed
I
my microphone
apologize.
to support you, but on the motion, I think this is entirely appropriate. I want to reiterate, this is an open procurement. There is no bias
Correct.
or towards the current vendor, and I would certainly hope that by sending the signal that we will get more people to bid on this, and I will be disappointed if we don't see more than one, and we will have to, I would, at that point, have a discussion about reevaluating this entire process. But I fully support the motion, and I appreciate both you, Madam Chair, and the members making the motion. I think it's highly appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Costigan. Yes, I really hope that this sends a message, so I appreciate that. I believe all those in favor of the motion? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. So we're on to item 7, which is information agenda item 7A. Mr. Grimes, the Enterprise Risk Management Framework Review.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members, members of the board. Thank you for attending. Forrest Grimes, CalPERS team. Today, we're really going to discuss the current state of enterprise risk management efforts here at CalPERS. Highlights include the risk management dashboard that shows the fiscal year 2018-19 enterprise-wide risk assessment outcomes, and those can be found in attachment 1. Enterprise risk profiles were updated by cross-functional working groups, and those profiles can be found as attachment 2 to your agenda item. And the risk heat map is provided to show the prioritization of each enterprise risk, and that's attachment 3. If I could please get you to turn to page 143 of your board books. I'm hoping that what you see there looks very much like what's on the screen, if not identical.
Got it.
You can see really from this dashboard that information security, governance and control environment, talent management, and benefit administration remain the same as in the prior year. Business continuity, pension funding, and healthcare administration scores decreased in probability this year. And the stakeholder confidence score increased in probability slightly this year. So before I continue, I would like to stop on this graphic, this page, to make sure that you don't have any questions on any of the enterprise risks and how these were arrived at.
Yeah, first, I just want to commend you and staff on the decrease in those risk scores, and it's all your efforts are appreciated and actually quantified. So thank you, Ms. Mother.
Yeah, I would echo those comments, but I also wanted to ask a question because each of the risk statements is in the form of sort of a negative statement that a failure to do something or a lack of something or an inability to do something could result in these negative consequences.
Yes.
And I guess I wonder if it's if that's the standard in the industry, if there's a reason for stating them in a negative fashion, or if stating them in a more positive fashion, like that recovering timely and resuming business functions following a business interruption event creates confidence in the CalPERS system, or something. I don't know that if there's a positive way to state them, but maybe it's the standard and that's the way it should be.
That's a great question, and so it's we can certainly discuss that, but I would say that it is standard in the risk industry to state risk statements in the negative. And if you kind of think about it, this goes back to the June item, and then I think it was the September item when we were talking about the strategic risk measures and then the strategic risk tolerances. Now, we're intending to integrate those into the enterprise reporting structure that you're very familiar with so that they complement them. And put in that light, I think that I would say that that risk is really the Darth Vader of performance, or the dark side of the performance equation. And so truly these are things that you hope don't happen.
Sure.
And so when stated like in the affirmative negative fashion, it's really saying, hey, what would happen if like this really occurred?
Right.
And it's really a negative performance. So that's really why they're written that way, but I certainly understand your comment.
I guess I'm wondering, and maybe a better example is the new one that was drafted for governance and control environment. It states lack of a strong internal control environment could result in increased noncompliance, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess I was wondering as I was reading that if it would be better to say existence of a strong internal control environment could avoid increased noncompliance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I only pose it for consideration. It's not something that I'm necessarily suggesting we change today, but ultimately, the whole point of us assessing risks is to try to avoid those risks from manifesting.
Yes.
And maybe that's embedding the mitigation in the risk statement. I don't know. Perhaps this is all much ado about nothing, but.
Well, I mean, we'll certainly give it some thought. I mean, you know, the risk team likes a challenge, so we'll bring some things back, and we'll see what the committee thinks. You know, we will. We'll take a look at that and see if we can actually. I think that if you look at the risk profiles, you can see that if you looked at last year versus this year, you can really see kind of a streamlining and really trying to refine our language so that each of them read very similarly. And so certainly at the very start of this whole process, you know, several years ago, I really kind of suggested this would be an iterative process, and I think it continues to be and will be throughout time. So that's a great suggestion, and we'll take a look.
Thanks.
I think from my experience in the industry, in terms of risk, people respond better to pain. And it forces them to take action, whereas, okay. Mr. Miller?
Just a little quick comment on that as well. I think the way people generally approach risk and think about it is in terms of consequence, in terms of adverse consequence and probability, whether it's failure modes of a process or whether it's not really focused on that upside when things, it's for those, especially those low frequency, high consequence events. I think it's framed this way in this kind of lexicon to really emphasize that this is about mitigating against those adverse versus your normal operational improvements, et cetera.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, this was an information item.
I do have
Oh,
one
I'm
other
sorry.
topic.
Go ahead.
If you have time.
Oh, yeah, no, we're fine.
Okay. And Mr. Miller, that was our intent, and certainly Ms. Mother will take your comments into consideration as well, and we'll come back and really scrutinize those. But that truly was the intent, as Mr. Miller stated. If you could turn to page 160 of the board books, please. This will be quick, and my final item. You can see that this is really the heat map. It's been updated to reflect the scores that occurred this year as a result of the risk assessment. You can see the impact to CalPERS is represented on the y-axis, with the probability being represented on the x-axis, and velocity, which is really more easily thought of as the speed of onset of an occurrence, is represented by the size of the bubble. And so you can see that really we have what this really is intended to do is to have the organization really take a look at how should we be responding to these risks, and what kinds of resources should we be assigning to these risks. So that's really the intent of this. I think that, you know, as we proceed into the next year, next steps will be coming back to you in February of 2019 to really propose a reporting format and structure to you to really kind of take the risk measures into the more dashboard kind of reporting like you're used to seeing with enterprise performance reporting at this point. And that will really start to fully integrate performance and risk into the conversations that we have in our decision making. And I think really that's the end game and that's the goal. So I think this year will be a really great year. With that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. And one of the things I may have suggested for one of our board retreats, it doesn't right now, but how we would respond, or maybe we need to go through a mock cyber attack, you know, just something to put on the calendar.
Like a tabletop or something
right,
like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And seeing no further questions, Ms. Diodamos, summary of committee direction.
Well, the only direction, if there is one, would be related to the risk statement, and I'm not sure based on the discussion if there was one. So I'm happy to know. Okay, I didn't think so, but that was the only one that I potentially recorded.
right, and the rebid, but,
Yeah, well, that's an
but
action
that's-
item, so that's
okay.
not a summary of committee direction.
okay. Okay, seeing no anyone to speak, no? Okay, then we're going into closed session at 3:20. The Risk and Audit open session is adjourned.
Thank you.
Good job.